I guess I put off this video for long enough. I know I said this before that I don't really like to rank pieces of media, movies, or television, or games, but if I feel like it's warranted, or if I feel like I can add something new to the table, or something somewhat different, I suppose, then I'm all for doing it. At one point I decided that I wasn't going to do something like this, but then in light of how much more content from this genre that we've gotten over the last decade, why not? And now that WandaVision has restarted the MCU after the long break we've had from COVID, some of the new releases are starting to creep into the picture. Hopefully we won't have to wait too much longer. It's put me in a mood to rank some of my all-time favorites from the genre. Now, bear in mind, this is my own personal list. Don't take this as the be-all end-all. I am more than positive that I'm going to get some kind of backlash for this, but rankings can be kind of fun. So without further ado, let's get into it. But first, I'll rattle off the honorable mentions for you. X-Men 2 United, Unbreakable, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Spiderman Into the Spider-Verse, Avengers Infinity War, and Logan. All really good or great movies in their own right, but they couldn't quite make the cut for the top 10 threshold. But in any case, let's get into the top 10 superhero films of all time. At number 10, we have Wonder Woman, directed by Patty Jenkins, starring Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, among many others. This movie had been long in development for many years. Joss Whedon at one point was supposed to direct it with Kobe Smulders as the title character. Previously, Wonder Woman was portrayed by Linda Carter. Outside of Gal Gadot, she's probably the most iconic actress to play her. But with the start of the DCEU, a Wonder Woman feature film was finally getting put into production. Leading up to it, the excitement on my end wasn't really that high. I had a bit of a sour taste in my mouth from the previous DCEU films, Man of Steel, Dawn of Justice, Suicide Squad, no. And the casting of Gal Gadot, didn't really know who she was. Seen her maybe in a thing or two like Date Night, and I heard that she was in the Fast and Furious, but man was I wrong. She was incredible as the character. And this movie, I'm gonna say it, I mean, it's in my top 10. It's one of the best comic book films I've ever seen. It is so colorful in the right ways. Might be a little too dreary in some ways, but considering its setting during the First World War, I think it made perfect sense. And Patty Jenkins and the writers put so much heart and personality into the film. At Diana learning about our world, or the modern world as it was back in 1917, it feels so natural. It's not cringe-inducing necessarily. It's very fish out of water-like, kind of like the first Thor, but it feels so genuine. And with the combination of the directing, the writing, and Gal Gadot's charmingly beautiful performance, I must say. And the dynamic between her and Chris Pine's character, Steve Trevor, it all just worked for me. It was so beautifully done. I'm not beating around the bush when I say that. It's beautifully done. And there was some concern, especially on my end, that they were going to try to put down men as a way to empower this powerful female character. Thankfully, though, they don't go in that direction. The one scene where they could have easily gone that way is where Chris Pine says, "You can't cross that barrier. That's no man's land. No man can cross it." Instead of saying, "But I'm not a man, so I can cross it. Bye." She just says, "No, this is what I gotta do." And it leads to that great action scene where she takes on the Germans in no man's land. Woo! Talk about insanity. The only thing that kind of bugged me was the villains, played by the guy who was in X-Men Origins Wolverine and the Dr. Poison. When you find out who the actual villain is in Ares, it really does not work on that end. But all in all, I think Wonder Woman is among the best. At number 9, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Most of the movies in the MCU have a very different type of feel to it. Even though you can tell it's in the same universe, this one touches on the action spy thriller genre like Jason Bourne or Clear and Present Danger. The action of Jason Bourne with the shaky cam effects, which sometimes is a detriment to the movie, but I think it's done with some better skill. And having seen the other movies that the Russo brothers did as the MCU went on, it's a lot more forgivable. We see Captain America trying to adapt to our modern world in a post-9/11 America, struggling to deal with the fact that the government could blow people away at any second before they can actually commit a crime, and along the way discover certain secrets that have severe, dire consequences in the long run, especially when it involves an old friend from his past. A man at a time who has no home to go back to, but yet manages to maintain his integrity and stay a good person, keeping the promise of Dr. Abraham Erskine, while also showing the blossoming friendship between him and Black Widow, and forming a new partnership with Sam Wilson, played by Anthony Mackie. After the first Captain America and the first Avengers movie, I think this movie really sold a lot of people on Captain America, myself included, and I'm gonna go as far as to say he is my favorite Avenger and my favorite character in the MCU, and you couldn't have chosen a better actor to play him than Chris Evans. Number 8 is the one that started it all for the MCU, Iron Man, starring Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Jon Favreau, Jeff Bridges, amongst many others. Nobody could have seen this movie coming. You can check out my review if you want to know my full thoughts. This was a huge, huge surprise for myself and many other people. Robert Downey Jr., who had fallen far off the map in light of his drug addiction, he had done other movies before this, but this is the one mainstream movie that really catapulted him back into popularity. He would not be where he is today if it wasn't for this movie. Robert Downey Jr. plays a bit of a variation of himself along with the character that fans know from the comics, but he has more of a quick wit to him. They do a good job of showing you that despite his textbook narcissism, he actually is a good person who does care about people. And then when he realizes what his weapons are being used for when he's taken prisoner by the terrorists, he vows to eschew all of his weapons dealing and use his company for the greater good, much to the chagrin of Obadiah Stane, played by Jeff Bridges, who later turns out to be the main antagonist. The action is fantastically helmed by Jon Favreau. The music, might not be quite as memorable as some other superhero musical themes, but it's really, really good. And it's got that hard rock metal feel. And the way the movie ends is such a complete 180 turn, and how it deals with the secret identity aspect of the superhero tale. Everything about Iron Man is perfect. Number 7, The First Avengers from 2012, written and directed by Joss Whedon, starring just about everybody in this movie. It was a great coming together of all these heroes and the great culmination of what started in 2008 with the first Iron Man, continued with Thor, Captain America, with all these different characters melded into one movie. A lot of people were very concerned about this, considering what we had in Spider-Man 3 where it felt like an over-convoluted mess. Not in this case. Joss Whedon found the right balance to give every single character a moment to shine. And what I really like is that they don't really like each other at first. The strong butting heads of personalities, including Captain America and Iron Man, it feels very natural because they all have an end game to take the Tesseract from Loki, coming from various areas of their lives, but they inevitably have to bond together in order to take the Tesseract and stop Loki from bringing the Chitauri army from Thanos to basically take over the world. Yeah, it's a cliche take over the world plot we've seen a million times, but the difference is we've had the time to build up these characters, and now that they're together, we have more of a reason to root for them. Their humanity is what makes you latch onto them. It's not just a bunch of mindless explosions that we saw in movies like the Transformers at the time. And it has some of the best lines too.
He killed 80 people in 2 days.
He's adopted.
And of course, this.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
The theater that I saw this in was roaring with laughter. May not be the most groundbreaking entry in the genre, but man, did it leave an impression. And to this day, it's still one of my all-time favorites in the genre, and maybe even one of my all-time favorite movies, who knows. Number 6. Well, I had to throw this on here somehow. Spider-Man 2002, starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, J.K. Simmons, and many other people. Directed by Sam Raimi, written by David Koepp. As far as Spider-Man movies go, this and its sequel, I still think are the best live-action adaptations, because the others that came afterward, except for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, none of them have come close to this level of quality. It may seem a bit obnoxious to see Spider-Man's origins told over and over again, but at the time, nearly 20 years ago, holy crap, 20 years ago, it was so refreshing to see a character at that time that wasn't Batman, that wasn't Superman, that wasn't a really dark character or serious take on the genre like the XMen at that time. You compare it to like the Richard Donner Superman, where it's like, that's the comic book come to life. It was a young kid in high school who had a very kind-hearted, endearing soul to him. And him discovering his powers, it's so much fun. And the setup of the conflict and rivalry between Harry and Peter over MJ and Norman Osborn, played excellently by Willem Dafoe, is so well handled. And it doesn't feel overly dramatic either, and it does a good job of showing you both sides of the coin. You really do like Peter, but you also understand why Harry feels the way he does when he sees that his father basically rejects him in favor of Peter. And I don't care what anybody says here, but Tobey Maguire is the best Peter Parker Spider-Man that we've ever had.
Blasphemer!
Well, I guess I had it coming, but I really think that he is, I apologize for the pun, amazing. And you know what? I thought Kirsten Dunst was a really good Mary Jane Watson. The damsel in distress thing, yeah, it's a little obnoxious after a while, and the costume with Willem Dafoe as the Goblin suits a little ridiculous, but it could have been a lot worse. And for those who complain that it's too cheesy, have you read the 60s comics, which is what this is based off of? It's a lot worse in that regard, trust me. I've said just about everything that has to be said, although it's probably not going to be the last time that I talk about it, but Spider-Man 2002, Yeah, I can't sing its praises enough. I will sing this movie's praises as well as its sequel to my grave. Even when I go onto the other side, I'm still gonna wave the flag of approval for this one. Number 5. Captain America: Civil War, my favorite solo MCU film. Yeah, I know it feels like an Avengers movie, but I think it finds the right balance just like the first Avengers did and all the other Avengers movies. Certain things that happened in the past have caught up with the Avengers. Now they have to decide, should they report to the government or should they continue to be their own entity? Captain America, who's grown weary of governmental oversight because of Hydra, is pushing back against it. Tony Stark, who at first was pushing back, is now being more submissive to them. Two separate journeys going in opposite directions. And I love how they introduced Peter Parker in this movie, played perfectly by Tom Holland in this movie at least. Some people say that Tom Holland's their favorite Spider-Man. That's totally cool. Not my personal favorite, but I think he's a solid choice for this movie and this universe in particular. His intro, I was freaking out when I saw the word Queens with the your left hand's free and your right hand grip, or whatever that song goes. So you're the Spiderling, crime-fighting spider. You're Spider-Boy? Spider-Man. Not in that onesie you're not. It's not a onesie. And the airport battle is one of the best action sequences I have ever seen. And has the best Star Wars reference that I've ever seen in a movie. Black Panther's introduction, Scarlet Witch coming into her own against Vision, Ant-Man's inclusion in this movie. Oh my god, it's such great stuff. And the way this movie ends, instead of a big city battle with a beam in the sky, it comes down as a personal battle between Tony and Steve. Huge departure from what we had seen in the MCU up until that point, and it was so refreshing to see that. And it doesn't give us a clear-cut answer on whether or not we can still do the right thing when we're confronted with something that really, really hurts us, like with the stuff with Tony's parents, and the Winter Soldier being controlled by Hydra, which made him do all these crazy and dark things, and Steve feeling some kind of loyalty to him because of their friendship. It leaves it up to interpretation that there's really no good answer. And as far as I'm concerned, I think it really depends on who you are as a person. And since the Russo brothers came back to direct this, well, I think it's proven by now that nobody else could have done this other than them. Especially since they did the other two Avengers films afterward. Number 4, in my book, this is the best of the X-Men series besides X-Men 2 and Logan. Days of Future Past. The combination of the original cast from the early 2000s as well as the newer generation of characters from X-Men First Class. Bryan Singer coming in to correct the wrongs from X-Men 3 onward. All the time travel shenanigans that have ensued. Wolverine going back to the 1970s, trying to convince a young Charles Xavier of what's going to happen in the future with a future war between them and machines. It's like a mixture of Terminator and the first Back to the Future. And in a lot of ways, I feel like this movie, which is also written by Simon Kinberg, has a bit of an Avengers feel to it, especially when Logan at first loses his memory and Charles Xavier goes, "You're on acid. Someone gave you really bad acid." Sounds like something that Joss Whedon would write. And this is probably the best use of Mystique, played by Jennifer Lawrence. You guys know how I feel about her, but as Mystique, I've been very iffy on her in the recent ones. I think this was her best outing as the character. It has the most emotional weight to her, while also having the physical presence that she could really, really kill you if she wanted to. Don't mess with that woman. You're gonna get the horns. But the heart and soul of this movie is Charles Xavier, played by James McAvoy, instead of having Wolverine as the lead once again. He might be the coach in this story, but he's definitely not the player. And how he tries to learn to have hope again by talking to his future self, played by Patrick Stewart. The arc that he goes through in here, watch the movie and see for yourself. It is so, so great. And James McAvoy sells the hell out of it. And the ending of this movie reminded me of the ending of Back to the Future, where everything goes back to an even better future. And if you ask me, besides Logan, this is where the series should have ended. But in any case, I still think this is the best in the franchise and one of the best in the genre. Number 3. I debated about this for a long time, but I'm gonna go with it anyway. I don't care how many people give me crap for it, but it's Avengers Endgame. The great culmination and the perfect ending in my book to the Infinity Saga. The wrapping up of certain overall character arcs from Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, while also leaving certain things open for characters like Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy, and amongst others. And while it may be a bit confusing for some people, the time travel aspect was very, very unique in its own right. Where instead of going back and changing the past, we're therefore changing the future, this time it creates a branch reality, like an alternate parallel dimension. And the climactic battle between the Avengers and Thanos' army, it is literally indescribable. It is practical insanity at its finest. Especially with Captain America with the... Go watch the movie and see for yourself, okay? If you haven't, please, check it out. It needs to be seen. Because the crowd that I saw it in theaters exploded. It was nuts. So yeah, Avengers Endgame, boy, that's great stuff. Number 2. I couldn't possibly put all of these throughout the list, but I'm gonna say that it's the Dark Knight Trilogy by Christopher Nolan. To me, all 3 of these movies feel like one big giant 6-hour movie. Batman Begins is a fantastic origin story where we finally got to see the training that Bruce Wayne experienced with the League of Shadows being trained by Ra's al Ghul or Henry Deckard, and rising to the occasion to be the symbol of hope for Gotham City, and deciding not to become an executioner as a result of his deep-seated anger and hatred towards injustice. Do I have to say anything else about The Dark Knight? Batman is challenged psychologically by this crazy anarchic clown with zero empathy, played superbly by the great late Heath Ledger, God rest his soul. An Oscar-worthy performance which is scary and darkly funny, and showing the duality of man, where the Joker believes that people are not good at heart, that you can corrupt them if you put them in certain situations, and the city of Gotham blaming Batman for all the chaos that's happening because of his extreme methods, and all comes to a head in The Dark Knight Rises, where Batman is brought back into the arena challenged physically by Bane, and where he finally learns to overcome his demons and finally is able to move on and fulfill his mission as the Batman, while leaving it open for a new Dark Knight to take on the occasion, with the help of Anne Hathaway as Catwoman, who I think is the best Catwoman that we've had by far, and Tom Hardy as Bane. All the villains in these 3 movies are perfect casting in my book. You couldn't have picked anybody else. The realistic tone, the musical score by Hans Zimmer, the cinematography by Wally Pfister, the writing, everything about this trilogy is flawless in my book. And I know some people aren't gonna like what I have to say here, but Christian Bale as the Batman, I don't care what his voice sounds like. He is the Batman. He is the best Batman I think that we've ever had. And finally, number 1. Some of you who know me best, you're probably gonna say, Joe, where is that movie? Well, here it is. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. Tobey Maguire returning as the character, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. This, I think, is the best portrayal of Spider-Man in live action by far. We as the audience get to understand the psychology of Peter's character, trying to balance his personal life as a normal guy in New York City while also trying to fulfill his responsibilities as a superhero. Everything goes down the toilet for Peter in this one. He's failing at school, he loses his pizza delivery job, Mary Jane wants to marry somebody else, Harry hates him because he believes that Spider-Man killed his father, Peter takes pictures of Spider-Man still, feels a large amount of resentment towards him because of it. Aunt May is about to lose her house, the Daily Bugle continues to write smearing stories about Spider-Man, therefore causing New York to turn against him, and therefore he gives it all up, and everything seems to go okay, but then he starts to realize that he's not fully satisfied, and ultimately he decides that he can be happy as a heroic figure, because that's what he's meant to do, especially considering the new threat that's come onto the scene in the form of Dr. Octopus, Dr. Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina, who is one of the best villains ever put into the genre. If you've read the comics, Doc Ock wasn't really that interesting of a villain. He's basically a fat guy with a bowl cut, with a bit of a mad scientist, but in this movie, they give you a reason to care about him because they show his backstory and how he wants to provide energy of tritium to the rest of the world. His wife helps him out in the process, and Peter's bonding with him over their shared interest in science. It gives you a reason to care about Otto, and it makes it even more tragic once you see the rest of the film play out, and inevitably, he does end up going out as a good guy. And despite where the third movie goes, I love how it sets up Harry to be the main bad guy in the third one, and the way this movie ends with Peter and MJ makes me bawl like a baby. It is so... oh, God. I can't sing this movie's praises enough, but Spider-Man 2 is, yeah, it's the best. In my book, it's the best of the genre, and my all-time favorite movie, next to its predecessor. And apparently, there's rumors that Tobey Maguire's going to actually show up in a multiverse movie in the MCU soon. Okay. Trying to stay calm. Those are my top 10 favorites in the comic book movie genre. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really had a great time doing this. And what are your top 10 favorites? And how do you feel about this list? Do you love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, and whatever your top 10 lists are, comment below and tell me your thoughts. And I'll see you guys in the next video.